Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we're bringing you part 5 in our Aeon Trespass Odyssey instructional series. Today we'll be covering the Titan round. Now this will likely be one of the longest videos in the series, as we'll be covering roughly pages 44 to 62 in the rulebook. So buckle in, it's going to be a fun ride. Be sure to check out our previous videos. Part 1 covered the basics, Part 2 covered the voyage phase, Part 3 covered the adventure phase, and Part 4 covered battle setup and the primordial round of the battle. And so now we're getting to the Titan round. Let's go. During battles, you play as mortal Argonauts piloting these Dreamwalker Titans. Now I say Dreamwalker Titan because that is the type of Titan you will start your campaign with. There are 4 Dreamwalker Titan sheets, each with different artwork, but each Dreamwalker is identical in terms of abilities. You will also end up unlocking additional Titans, such as the Earthshaker Titan. You can see it does not say Dreamwalker here, so it's an easy way to realize that it has some sort of ability different than those initial starting Titans. The Titan sheet shows the Titan's power die, their speed value, any inherent abilities, as well as their trauma table and their Kratos table. The Titan's power will show the number of power dice they roll in every power roll. Some Titans will have additional abilities listed here as well, or even raw power. A Titan's speed is the maximum number of spaces they can move with a movement action. A Titan's abilities are available to the Argonaut anytime they're using that Titan during battle. The trauma table represents the Titan's ability to stay in the fight. It features various trauma thresholds: minor, major, grave, and obel. And these correspond to your current danger level, which is of course tracked on your Triskelion here. Anytime you are instructed to conduct a trauma draw, you then check your current danger level and draw a trauma or obel card based on what your danger is in reference to this chart. As you can see, different Titans may have slightly different tables. For here, 1 to 3 is minor. For the Logic Breaker, 1 is actually obel, and then 2 to 4 is minor. 5 to 7 is major, 8 to 9 is grave, and 10 goes back to obel again. The Kratos table reflects that the more rage you have, the more deadly you become. Most of these effects are keyword abilities, and they will follow the normal rules of keyword abilities. As your rage increases, you will gain the benefits of your current level as well as all previous levels. Any symbol found on a Titan's Kratos table is explained on the back of that Titan's sheet. Many mechanisms in Aeon Trespass Odyssey revolve around close cooperation between players. One such mechanism is the Kratos Token mechanism. This is known as a break token, and this is an opening token. Kratos Tokens are a special kind of ability that allows you to leave helpful effects for others to use. You may leave Kratos Tokens as a result of weapon abilities, Kratos tables, or through other game effects. All Kratos Tokens are placed in the Kratos pool. They can then be used during the following Titan attack, after which they are discarded if not used. While opening and break Kratos Tokens are the most common, there are others as well that you will discover as you play the game. Opening tokens add +1 to the result of attack dice, while break tokens can convert this potential symbol here, the little triangle you see there, into 1 power. Most abilities allow you to place Kratos Tokens in the Kratos pool during the second ability window at the very end of a Titan attack. There are some rare abilities, however, that may allow you to place Kratos Tokens during the first ability window, making your own attack stronger rather than the next attack. Gear cards represent various types of equipment used by Titans in their battles against Primordials. Most gear is crafted during the advancement step, however, other gear is gained as rewards from adventures, critical wounds, and other sources. Each gear has a symbol that designates its type. It may also have offensive stats here and defensive stats here on the right, an ability box down here, and gear traits down here at the very bottom. There are 4 types of gear cards. Weapons, such as this one, will show that they either take up 1 2, or in rare cases, 3 hands. It should be noted that in Aeon Trespass Odyssey, anything carried in your hand is considered a weapon. So you can see this knuckle shield is a shield, but for all purposes in this game, it's also considered a weapon. This means that while everything you carry gives you some sort of offensive capability, some things you carry may also give you defensive capabilities. Next type of gear is armor, denoted by this symbol. This category includes all sorts of defensive gear that covers the Titan's body. These cards usually grant armor dice, as you see here. They may grant some sort of evasion bonus and evasion rolls, or a combination of these defensive statistics. Most Titans have a slot for 1 armor gear. The next type of gear is support, denoted by this symbol. Support gear gives you access to unique abilities and effects. Support cards don't usually have defensive or offensive statistics, and by default, Titans have 2 support slots. A similar symbol is this, which is an attachment. These cards must be attached to another game element, depending on what the card says. In the case of this one, you can see it does need to be attached to a gear card, and specifically a gear card with the spear trait. They may modify the game element they are attached to, apply additional effects, or give you access to completely new abilities. Normally, a Titan sheet can have up to 3 attachments, and each other card can have 1. Even without a weapon, a Titan is armed, with its fists and teeth and grit. A Titan always has access to their fists. Fists can be used one-handed or two-handed. This is important to remember since it does have the two-handed symbol here, but keep in mind one-handed is also allowed. If after they perform their gear loadout, they have more than 1 free hand slot, they can equip the fist card as well. If at any point during a battle a Titan loses their weapon card or cards, they can immediately equip the fist card and use it as a single or double-handed weapon. When a Titan is about to declare an active weapon during an attack, they can choose to discard 1 or more of their equipped weapon cards to instead equip fists. If at any point in the battle the Titan gains a weapon card that uses up their hand slots occupied by fists, you must set the fist card aside. It's no longer equipped. If at any point in the battle the Titan gains a weapon card that uses up their hand slots occupied by fists, you must set aside the fist card as the Titan no longer has it equipped. Fist can be exhausted or discarded just like any other gear card. If a Titan loses its fist card and has no other weapon, it is truly helpless. If a game element is exhausted or lost for any reason, the attachment that it has is also in the same state. Now let's discuss some offensive gear stats. This right here shows the number of attack dice this gear allows the Titan to roll, in this case 1 attack die. Below that is the precision bonus, in this case +1. Below that is the weapon's power, which shows the number of power dice you will roll for each hit. So if somehow you were able to generate 2 hits with this Siren Blade, you would actually roll 4 power dice. Often you will also find bonus power below that, and in this case you can see you have +1 raw power, but this could also take the form of additional power dice. You'll also note that this +1 power is gated, and we'll talk about that more in just a minute. Now let's discuss some defensive stats. This right here indicates that this smelted breastplate allows you to roll armor dice, in this case 2 armor dice. This instinct linothorax shows +1 for your evasion bonus. You add this to the result of each of your evasion dice. And the Shipwrecker Shield here shows that you can actually re-roll a number of dice up to the value indicated, in this case 2. These are evasion re-rolls. These work just like a fate re-roll, but they don't carry any additional cost. It's also important to remember that you can only re-roll each individual die a single time, no matter how many re-rolls you have. So now let's discuss gated abilities and effects. Right here you can see this indicates danger 7+, and here you can see danger 8+. and then it indicates some sort of ability under it. In the case of Siren Blade, +1 power. In the case of Smelted Breastplate, Reinforce 2 instead of Reinforce 1. You will frequently find gear cards have effects and abilities that are gated behind a danger level, which is the most common, or sometimes gated behind other stats. Once the gated requirement is met, the ability or effect is treated as if it were part of the normal ability box. If at any point you stop meeting the gate requirement, the ability is again locked and unavailable. So, if the Titan was at 7 danger and then some effect reduced it down to 6, they would no longer be getting this +1 power. It should also be noted, by the way, that the back of gear cards will have a little bit of flavor text, but more importantly, it'll show you the cycle it belongs to, as well as the technology used to build that particular gear. Pattern cards represent permanent enhancements and modifications applied to the Titans themselves. These can take the form of specialized training or outright augmentations to the Titan's biology, and are introduced through strain cards. Pattern cards can modify the trauma table, as you see here, or the Kratos table. Whenever a pattern is applied to a Titan, you will provide that Titan a name. You will note that on the Argonaut sheet. You will then note the pattern that it belongs to that Titan, and this connection is permanent. In other words, once that Titan is named, they will always use this pattern, and if that Titan dies, the pattern dies with them. So, in this case, when this Titan would be used, you would place the Iapetan Strain trauma table over the normal trauma table. The Titan round proceeds as follows. You have the start of the Titan round, then you have Titan turns in which they will move and likely attack, and you'll see on the back of a Titan sheet there is a Titan attack sequence for your reference, and then you'll have the end of the Titan round. The start of Titan round and end of Titan round steps are important for any effects that are triggered by those specific moments. During the Titan round, they will get 1 movement action and 1 combat action, which can be used in any order. However, it's important to realize you must finish one of those actions before you perform the next one. It should also be noted, though, that you are not forced to perform all of your actions, but any unused actions will be lost and do not carry over to following turns. A Titan's turn ends immediately once it has performed all of its available actions. If you need help tracking that, you can turn your Argonaut 90 degrees sideways to indicate they have been used. It should be noted, though, that for any effect that requires exhausting of a card, this does not count as exhausting a card. It is simply to help you keep track of which Argonauts and their Titans have taken turns. When you perform your movement, you can move a number of spaces up to the Titan's speed value. If you recall, Ulyssia here has a speed value of 5, and so she could move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's very important to realize that all movement is performed in cardinal directions. You may not move diagonally. You cannot move through any obstacle or chasm terrain tiles. As you can see here, the column is listed as an obstacle. The Cyclops trap is listed as a chasm. You cannot move through other Titans or Primordials. You cannot move through any red lines. And as a single movement, you may not move onto the same space twice. So for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If for some reason that was advantageous, you would not be allowed to do that. There are certain effects or abilities you may encounter that allow you to move a certain number of spaces without actually performing a move. This would be referred to as a move-like ability. These are resolved exactly the same way as a movement, except they are not considered a movement for the purpose of other abilities and effects. Any movement caused by an opposing force, such as a primordial action causing Titan movement, or Titan actions causing Primordial to move, is considered involuntary and must be resolved up to its maximum value unless some other effect forces you to stop. The most common cause of involuntary movement are knockbacks and pushbacks. Involuntary movement is resolved like voluntary movement with the following exceptions. Titans can be involuntarily moved through spaces with other figures and obstacle terrain tiles. If a Titan is involuntarily moved into the board edge, it continues its movement along the board edge away from the source of the involuntary movement. If a Titan ends involuntary movement on a space occupied by another Titan, this Titan will be displaced, meaning it will simply move to an adjacent space. And it could be this space, to an adjacent space. If a Titan is involuntarily moved onto a space with an obstacle terrain tile, it suffers crash, which means it gains +1 danger and suffers knockdown. If the terrain is destructible, it will be removed from the board. If the terrain was indestructible, it would stay on the board. If a Titan ends their involuntary movement on a chasm, or they are pushed onto such a space during pushback, they die. So just to reiterate, if the Primordial is using pushback, meaning they are actually pushing the Titan into the chasm, then the Titan will die the moment they go into the chasm. If the Titan has suffered knockback, then the Primordial has actually thrown, essentially, the Titan through the air, and as long as they don't end their movement there, they will move past it and land in a different space. If a Titan has any cards, effects, or abilities that allow it to reduce involuntary movement, these effects do stack. To perform a Titan attack, you will resolve these steps here. This is called the attack sequence. First, declare what weapon will be your active weapon. In this case, we'll say the Shipwrecker Shield. When you are about to attack, this chosen weapon must be unexhausted. If the weapon is already exhausted, then you cannot use it for this attack. You can also only choose a weapon as an active if the target is in its effective range. This is a melee weapon, and so the effective range is adjacent. If instead you were using the ballista gun, you can see it has a range of 4 to 6. This would mean that the Primordial can be no closer than 4 spaces and no further than 6 spaces from your Titan. There are also weapons with reach, which would allow the Titan to be, in this case, reach 2, so 2 spaces away, but this is still a melee weapon. You must also make sure you have line of sight to the Primordial, and we discussed line of sight in part 4 of this video series. If a weapon does not say ranged and it does not say reach, then it is considered a standard melee weapon and you must be adjacent. It should be noted that effective range for something like the ballista gun is calculated in cardinal directions. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, the Primordial is within effective range. It also should be noted that with a reach weapon, even though they can hit from a distance, so 1, 2, or 1, 2, they also can hit when adjacent. Once you have declared your active weapon, the next step is to raise your rage and check priority target. So you will raise your rage value by 1, and then you will check to see if your rage is higher than the priority target's rage. If it is, you become the new priority target. However, if it is equal to or less than the current priority target, then you are not the priority target and the current one retains the token. The third step is the attack roll. Roll a number of D10 attack dice equal to the attack dice value found on the weapon. You would then increase the result of each attack die by your weapon's precision bonus, in this case +0, but if it were the Siren Blade, for instance, you would have increased it by 1. Of course, you also would have only rolled 1 attack die in that case. Remember that you can use opening tokens also to increase the value of each die. Opening tokens essentially add to your precision. You can also use fate to reroll your dice, as we've discussed, or using other abilities and effects that provide attack rerolls. As a reminder, each die can only be rerolled 1 time, no matter how many rerolls you can afford. Each die with a result equal to or higher than the Primordial's 2-hit value found here, the level 1 Labyrinthorus, considered a hit. So we have a 9, which is more than 7+, but the 1 is not, so we have 1 hit. If you happen to hit with all of your attack dice, it is considered a full hit and activates any full hit abilities you have access to. Keep in mind that the only weapon you can use during this attack, including abilities on weapons, is the active one you chose. So if you were carrying 2 weapons, the inactive one cannot be used in any way, including full hit activation. If you miss with all of your dice, it is considered a full miss. In the case of a full miss, you will go straight to step 9 and ignore all the other steps. It's also important to realize that no matter what your modifiers are, a natural 10 is always a hit, a natural 1 is always a miss. Now, one thing that I didn't do, just for clarity's sake, is I did not use the crit die. When you attack, one of the dice you use must be the crit die. So in fact, the roll would look like this. You'd have a regular attack die, and you'd have your crit die, and you'd roll like this. If you roll only one die, the one die must be the crit die. The crit die is used to simulate strokes of luck as well as unexpected failures. If you roll a natural 10 with the crit die, you gain a crit chance for this attack. This may turn a wound into a critical wound. If you successfully wound a primordial when you have a crit chance, you will ignore everything else on the card except for the critical. If you fail to wound, then you resolve the responses as normal. You may have effects that refer to crit and miss. Resolve this effect only if you roll a natural 1 on the crit die. If you choose to re-roll this die, then you still must resolve the crit miss effects, regardless of the next result. If, when you re-roll this die, you re-roll a crit miss again, then you will have to resolve the crit miss effects a second time. And you're evading, you also use the crit die, and if you roll a natural 10 while evading, it is considered a crit evade. And if you roll a natural 1 when evading, it is a crit evade fail. Well, let's say this is what we rolled when we attacked the Primordial with the Shipwrecker Shield. We now move into the first ability window. At this point, you would activate any abilities from the Titan's Kratos table that would apply. Certain Nemo's cards, your active weapons, and any other non-weapon equipment cards may also have first ability window effects. It's important to realize, though, that only the attacking Titan may activate abilities during this window. After resolving the first ability window, you now go to draw BP card, or body part card. So we have hit it one time, so we will now draw one body part card from the body part deck. You'll see that you can see a Roman numeral 1 here. So while you don't know exactly what it is, you know it's a level 1 BP card, and that gives you some sense. You know, if it's level 2 or level 3, you might be a little more concerned about what you are coming up against here. We'll then reveal the card, and it is the Eroded Breastplate. On a body part card, you'll find the primordial symbol here, the name of the body part card. The card level is again shown on this side. The higher the level, the harder it will be to wound. Any primordial resources you gain from this card, these are gained after the battle. This here is the Aeon Trespass field, which is the primordial's supernatural resistance to harm. The higher the AT, the harder it will be to wound, and the more power you will be required to generate. Here we find a wound response. There's several different types of responses you may encounter: wound, fail, or instinct. These trigger based off of, in the case of a wound, if the primordial is wounded here. In the case of a fail, then it triggers when you fail to wound it. And in the case of instinct, that response will trigger whether or not you wound this location. And the critical response is what happens if you critically wound this body part. Once we determine how many times we have hit the primordial, now we have to try to wound it. To wound the primordial, your total power must be equal to or higher than the body part card's Aeon Trespass number. First step in your power roll is creating the power pool. The higher the number of dice in your power pool, the better. Each successful hit grants you the power dice indicated on the weapon. So in this case, let's say we hit twice, we'll get 2 red power dice. Some weapons, as we've discussed, have additional power built into it, such as the Siren Blade, which provides an additional power if you are at 7+ danger. Your Kratos table may provide additional power dice depending on your current rage level. So if you're at 5, you would get an additional power die here. And be sure to add any other equipped non-weapon gear and other applicable game effects. Sometimes you may have to roll so many power dice that there are not enough provided in the game. If that's the case, roll the dice you have, notate your results, and then roll it again to get however many dice you need to roll. Also, just so you're aware, the red die is the least powerful, followed by the black, and then the white is the most powerful. Sometimes you may be told to upgrade your power die, and it would go from red to black, and then black to white. To perform the power roll, simply take all of the power dice from your power pool and roll them. Each of these symbols adds to your power. So in this case, we've rolled 3 power. Power dice cannot be rerolled using fate, but there are other effects that may grant you power rerolls. Just like other rerolls, a power die can only be rerolled one time regardless of the number of rerolls available to you. Let's say that this die had rolled this side. This is known as a potential. These do not provide you with any benefit by themselves, but there are effects that will turn them into power. The most common of these is the break token, as we've mentioned. So with this roll, you have 1, 2, 3 power and a potential, and with the break token, that potential is now a power as well, meaning you have 4 power. After resolving any rerolls and adding any effects to the power roll, converting potentials, you now have your total power for this attack. As you can see, we have 4 power, which is equal to the Primordial's AT value, and so we have wounded it. As long as you have a power value equal to or greater than the AT value, it's wounded. If you had gained a crit chance during the previous roll, you would now actually have critically wounded this body part. If not, then it is a regular wound. This card will now be placed in the wound stack. If the wound stack now is equal to or greater than this value, then the Primordial is defeated. The battle will immediately end at that point, with the Argonauts victorious. The one exception is the critical. If you scored this final wound with a critical, you will gain any tangible rewards from that critical before ending the combat. You do not, however, gain any additional attacks. However, if your total power is less than the AT value, then you have failed to wound. After resolving the power roll, you will see if any responses trigger, whether it's a wound response. So in this case, with a failed wound, this response would not trigger. With a successful wound, it would trigger. If the Primordial's response involves an attack, first complete your current attack sequence, and then the new attack will happen immediately after this one is completely resolved. Therefore, it does not cause a chain break. If the response does not involve any kind of new attack, then it is resolved immediately. It should also be noted that a response should be resolved regardless of the Titan's positioning. So even if a ranged attack would elicit a Primordial response, resolve that response as best as possible. However, knockback and knockdown are the exceptions. If for any reason a Titan isn't adjacent to the Primordial, for instance they used a ranged weapon, or they're using a reach weapon, or they moved away during a window of opportunity, then knockback or knockdown are ignored. If you have failed to wound the body part, then you will place it in the body part discard pile. In this case, you also will not perform an escalation. However, if you did wound the body part, it will go into the wound stack, at which point an escalation will occur. There are certain body part cards that are so devastating when wounded that they will deal additional wounds or even double wounds. The most common source of double wounds are the body part level 3 cards, but some game effects, especially critical wounds, can also cause you to deal additional single wounds. Generally speaking, if you wound a body part level 1 or 2, you will place it into the wound stack. It will be placed face up. This is considered a single wound. If you wound a body part level 3 card, you will instead place in the wound stack a double wound and set the wounded level 3 body part card to the side. This level 3 card will return to the body part deck after escalation. However, if you manage to critically wound a body part level 3, you will place it in the stack as normal, but it still counts as 2 wounds. This only occurs during a critical wound. If any effect ever instructs you to deal an additional single wound, you will simply place a single wound in the wound stack. So as we've mentioned, when you wound a body part, you will then perform an escalation. An escalation will occur slightly differently depending on which body part level you have wounded, and you can find all that information here on page 53 of the rules, but we're going to go through basically how these escalations work. So, if you have wounded a level 1 body part card, you place it in the wound stack. Since this was a level 1 body part card, you will then take all of the level 2 body part cards, make sure they're shuffled, take one at random, and shuffle it into the current body part deck. You then will look at the deck of AI cards. As soon as you find a level 1, in this case it's the very first one, you remove it from the deck, set it aside, take a random level 2 AI card, and shuffle it into the AI deck. Now let's say the AI deck actually, you look through and find that it only has level 2 AI cards. You'll then move on to the AI discard pile and find a level 1, again because the body part card that was wounded was level 1. And here the first one we come across is this one, so it is removed, and you again will replace it by shuffling a level 2 into the deck. And so again, that is the general principle with how you handle escalations. If you follow this chart here, you won't have any issues. It's a little bit different when you get to the level 3 body part cards, but again, no real issues as long as you follow this chart. The one thing I do want to point out is down here in this section, there was a correction to the rule book where it said instead the Primordial gains 1 bonus per wound. It actually meant 1 bonus per body part card. Occasionally certain effects will have you conduct escalations without a wound occurring. In that case, you conduct the escalation exactly the same way, except you will also have to find and remove the lowest value body part card from the body part card deck or discard pile. If you are outside of battle and you're instructed to escalate, you simply make a note of that, and then during setup, you perform an escalation. After completing the wounds and escalation step, the 9th step of the attack sequence is to clear the Kratos pool of any tokens that are inside of it. Finally, you enter the second ability window. Here you will activate applicable abilities from your Titan's Kratos table, Moiros Cards, and active weapon, and any other non-weapon cards equipped to your Titan. However, keep in mind that only the attacking Titan can activate abilities during this window unless there's some effect that explicitly states otherwise. Finally, after you've resolved the second ability window, if the attack triggered an attack response, like a primordial attack or a follow-up Titan attack, it will happen now. This begins a new attack sequence. If your Titan has access to any free actions, meaning an action that does not cost their movement or their combat action, they can perform as many of these free actions as possible. However, each free action can only be performed once per turn. However, keep in mind that unless you gain an additional action in some way, a Titan's turn ends immediately once both their movement and combat have been performed. There's no end of turn window. So, if you want to perform free actions, that must occur before you've completed both movement and combat. You could, however, perform a move, then a free action, and then combat, but once both move and combat have been completed, no more free actions until the next turn. The rarest type of Titan action is the reaction. This is denoted by this exclamation mark symbol here. So here you can see with the Iapetus Lifeguard, the Titan can react by spending a fate and exhausting this card, which will then allow them the ability Reflex, which is move 1 space. Actions may be performed during a window of opportunity, which you will find on AI cards with the same exclamation mark. Whenever you encounter this exclamation mark symbol preceding an instruction, you may activate reaction abilities immediately before you resolve that instruction. During a single window of opportunity, each Titan may activate any number of reaction abilities in any order, but no more than one ability with the same name per Titan. Each battle has a specific aftermath seen here. It'll describe what happens if you won the battle, if you were defeated, or if you retreated. Each battle nets you primordial resources from the wounds you've dealt. It's important to remember that you will gain these resources whether or not you win the battle. Generally, you gain the resources shown in the top right corner of each body part card in your wound stack. You will actually multiply these resources by the level of the primordial. So if it was a level 2, you would gain twice as many resources. You also gain one primordial core resource for every body part level 3 card in the wound stack. Remember, only critically wounded BP3 cards will actually end up in the wound stack. In addition, if you fight a level 3 or 4 primordial, you will gain bonus Ambrosia resources, which will be denoted in the corresponding level stat block on the primordial sheet, which you can see right here. So for level 3 Labyrintharus, you'd gain 3 Ambrosia. A level 4, you'd gain 12. If you have any generic single wound cards in the wound stack, first combine the body part discard pile with the body part deck and separate them by level. Then for each single wound, you will draw a random body part card of the lowest available level and gain its resources. For each double wound, you draw a random body part level 3 and gain its resources. But you will not gain cores for those since you did not critically wound it. All resources are noted on this section of the Argo sheet. If the primordial was slain by a critical effect such as this one, where if a crit happens on the will of Temenos, it immediately dies. This may cause the number of wounds in the wound stack to be lower than its actual health value. In this case, you will add the top card from the body part deck to the wound stack as if it was wounded. You will still use double wounds instead of BP3 cards. If that caused the number of wounds to be equal to or higher than the health of the primordial, then you will proceed to gaining resources as normal. If not, then escalate the body part deck and then do it again. Continue until the number of wounds in the wound stack is equal to or higher than the primordial's value. During the casualty step, be sure to note the loss of any titans on the Argo sheet. During this step, you will also discard all conditions, condition tokens, and other tokens on the titan sheet, such as Ambrosia or modifiers. Keep in mind that some conditions do have end-of-battle effects. At the end of a battle, the Argo fate is lowered by 2 during cycle 1 usually, and it may differ, but you will follow the instructions for how much to lower the Argo fate. All values on your Triskelion are also reduced back down to 0. Finally, after a battle is over, find all exploration cards that were previously removed until the next timeline battle, and shuffle them back into the exploration deck. Unlike Argonauts, Titans are expendable. In most cases, when you die in battle, it's just the Titan who dies. The Titan is removed from the board and cannot be used in any way, but you will still leave their condition tokens on the Titan, and you will not reset its Triskelion until instructed to do so at the end of the battle. However, there are certain story events as well as some especially brutal effects that may result in the Argonaut actually dying. In that case, you will consult the current cycle's Rude Awakening special event. For cycle 1, you can see that special events are on page 83, and Rude Awakening specifically is on page 84. The main thing is to remember that Argonaut death only occurs when very specifically instructed that it does. It's generally very rare. Even when an Argonaut dies, however, do not discard or destroy the Argonaut sheet. There are certain events that will reference deceased Argonauts later on. When a Titan dies, there is a bit of a mercy rule. If a Titan dies during an attack against the Primordial, you will ignore all negative responses elicited by that attack. If the Titan dies during a Primordial attack, the Primordial ends its attack, foregoing all lingering attack effects and after attack effects targeting that Titan. But keep in mind, if a Titan dies and the attack that killed them has an effect that is separate from the target or has other targets, those effects should still be resolved. A bonus attack is an effect that allows you to perform an immediate attack, often outside of your turn, Most bonus attacks cause a chain break, with one exception. That exception being that a bonus attack during a Titan attack is also called a follow-up Titan attack and is resolved immediately after the current Titan attack ends, which means that it does not cause a chain break. When making a bonus attack, you may declare an exhausted weapon as your active weapon. If you do, unexhaust it, and then continue the attack as normal. During a bonus attack, you may ignore attack responses to this attack. When the attack ends, continue resolving the battle round that was interrupted by the bonus attack as normal. Most battles give the players a chance to retreat if they think their chances of winning are slim. As you can see here, against the Labyrinthorus, retreat is possible when 2 or more Titans have died. For all purposes, retreat is treated as a defeat, but allows you to save the remaining Titans to fight another day. Most of the time, retreats will not be possible against adversaries or boss primordials. And that will be clear in the instructions for retreat, if any, on those pages. Sisyphus Tears are a mysterious divine resource of unknown origin. When a battle ends, players as a group may decide to spend 1 Sisyphus Tear to replay the battle without suffering any of its consequences. They do not lose Titans, they do not gain Doom, they do not resolve the end of battle effects. Simply restore the game to the state it was in before the battle. You can freely change your Titans and loadouts and prepared Argo abilities before you attempt the battle again. However, keep in mind that Sisyphus Tears are extremely rare and should not be spent lightly. Various effects will cause Titans and Argonauts to gain condition cards. These will apply various negative effects, and sometimes positive effects. When you gain a condition card, place it next to your Titan sheet. Certain condition cards require condition tokens. You place the indicated number of condition tokens on that card, and then follow any additional instructions. If you gain a condition card outside of battle, it remains active until the end of the next battle. All conditions are discarded during the casualty step of the battle aftermath. You cannot gain a condition if you already have it, but many conditions trigger additional effects if you would gain them again. Boons and afflictions are closely tied to your Argonaut. However, there are no physical components to represent these, and instead, you jot them down here in this section of your Argonaut sheet. Moiros Cards represent the consequences of trying to cheat fate one too many times. When any effect requires you to raise your fate over 9, you must immediately shuffle the Moiros deck and draw a random card. Keep this card until the end of the battle, even if its effects are not lasting. If you are ever forced to draw another Moiros card If you're ever forced to draw a Moiros card when you already have one, instead, you will die. Kratos cards are drawn when you temporarily lose control of your Titan and their bottomless rage takes over. When a game effect instructs you to draw a Kratos card, shuffle the Kratos deck and draw a random Kratos card. Keep this card until the end of the battle, even if its effects aren't lasting. If you ever are forced to draw a second Kratos card while you already have one, you die. Some effects will give you a chance to avoid drawing a Kratos card by resolving a Kratos roll. When you're instructed to perform a Kratos roll, roll a d10 and compare the result to your rage value. If it is equal to or higher than your rage value, you have succeeded the roll. In this case, obviously, I failed. Unless stated otherwise, when you fail a Kratos roll, you must draw a Kratos card. Kratos rolls cannot be re-rolled using fate. Ambrosia is a mysterious substance and is the lifeblood of the monstrous primordials. It's also used as a resource and fuel for the Argo. However, in its raw form, it is also extremely harmful. Its effects may cause Titans to gain Ambrosia tokens. When you do, you place it on your Titan sheet. There are certain effects that may trigger based off of Ambrosia tokens. However, the tokens themselves have no exact effect unless you exceed your limit. Each Titan has an Ambrosia limit, and unless your Titan sheet or some gear card states otherwise, your limit is 4. If you have multiple elements that modify your Ambrosia limit, choose the one with the highest Ambrosia limit. If at any point the number of Ambrosia tokens on your Titan sheet is higher than your Ambrosia limit, the Titan dies. Modifier tokens are used to mark temporary and permanent changes to Titans and Primordial's attributes. When a Titan or Primordial gains a modifier token, find the token with the corresponding icon and place it on the appropriate sheet. Blue is considered +1, red are considered -1. There may be times when you need more than one modifier token of a given attribute. For instance, maybe you need -5 movement. In that case, don't look for 5 movement tokens. Instead, take 4 generic tokens and stack them underneath the movement token to indicate -5. If the modifier you have gained is temporary, place it on the Triskelion, assuming, of course, this is a Titan modifier. If it's a temporary Primordial modifier, place it in the active Kratos pool. On the other hand, if it's a lasting modifier, meaning that it will last until the end of the battle, place them directly on the Primordial or Titan sheet that they apply to. Now let's discuss Vantage Points. Even though your Titan is big, the Primordials are much, much bigger. There are some Primordials that are so big that your Titan can actually climb on top of them. To do this, you must create a Vantage Point on the Primordial. Vantage Points are created generally through effects found on body part cards. Here you can see if you critical wound the shapeless form, you create a Vantage Point on the Labyrinthus. Each Primordial's Vantage Point effect is listed on their actual Primordial sheet. So for the Labyrinthus, you can see here that you have to test your Fury to climb onto the Vantage Point, and then you'll have to hold on at the end of the Primordial round. And then you have the Vantage Point effect here. When on the Vantage Point, you gain +1 power and ignore responses other than critical responses. The most important thing to realize, though, is that the Vantage Point is not accessible until you have actually created it through an effect. When a Primordial Vantage Point is created, some of the Primordials, such as the Labyrinthus, simply have a spot on their card for a Titan to climb onto them. Once a Vantage Point is created, you may have an interchangeable part to switch out on the Primordial to indicate this, or in the case of the Labyrinthus, you simply have opened up this space here to be used whenever a Titan finally climbs onto them. But as an example, here's the Alpha Temenos. If you create a Vantage Point for this Primordial, you would take this piece off and slip this piece on, and now any Primordial that climbed onto the Alpha Temenos would actually climb up right there. A Titan adjacent to the Primordial who has an unlocked Vantage Point may perform a climb test as a free action. So in this case, you may test Fury, and if you succeed on this free action, the Titan will have climbed aboard the Labyrinthus. Then at the end of the Primordial round, you'll have to make the test, as I mentioned, in this case, Endurance 6+. If you pass, the Titan will stay on the Labyrinthus. If they fail, they will be displaced to a rear space, knocked down, and so like this. However, Titans may also voluntarily move from a Primordial Vantage Point space to a space adjacent to the Primordial, maybe here or here, any adjacent space, and they make this move as if it were an adjacent space to the Vantage Point. If a Titan on a Vantage Point suffers knockdown or involuntary movement, they must first be displaced to a space adjacent to the Primordial. Also, for all Vantage Points, only a single Titan can occupy it at a given time. Vantage Points are considered both adjacent and in range 1 to the Primordial, as well as adjacent and in range 1 to all Titans that are adjacent to the Primordial. Titans on a Vantage Point will measure range to other Titans and game elements from the space occupied by the Primordial that is closest to that Titan or game element. It is important to realize that while Titans on the Vantage Point are considered adjacent to all Titans that are adjacent to the Primordial, any Titan adjacent to the Primordial is not considered adjacent to a Titan on the Vantage Point. I do want to point out that the rule book on page 59 addresses awakenings, However, these are not available to you until you have unlocked particular technology, and so for that reason, I'm not going to cover it in this video. Also, page 60 goes on to explain awakenings further, and then at the bottom, it begins explaining summonings, which also are not available at the beginning of the campaign, and so I will leave that for you to discover. Any ability that requires you to pay a cost, such as the Siren Shield ability here, which costs 2 fate, is known as an active ability. Ability costs could include using a combat action, using a movement action, using both of those actions, gaining fate, as you see here, exhausting a game element, or discarding a game element, which you see here. Now, real quick, I do want to point out that in this case, in this game, I should say, discarding does not mean discarding. It really should have been labeled flipping, because what you do when you discard a game element here is you flip it over, and then you still have that card, that shield in this case, for your next combat. There could be other more specific costs as well, but those will be listed in a very particular way so that there is no question about how to use them. Active ability usage is always voluntary, and as such, these costs can never be prevented or ignored by the use of other game effects. Any active ability that does not have a specific timing condition can be used as a free action. You also can only use each available active ability on a single game element once per round. Constant abilities are abilities that do not require you to pay any sort of cost. Most constant abilities will continuously seek a specific timing condition and must be resolved anytime that specified condition is met, unless the ability text itself says you may resolve it. So in this case, if you crit evade, then you must place 2 opening tokens in the Kratos pool. And as a general rule, you must always resolve keywords that place Kratos tokens in the Kratos pool. You also must resolve any keywords that hinder you in any way, such as cumbersome or commit. However, keep in mind that, generally speaking, move-like abilities may be used or not required to be used, and also any ability that allows you to forcefully move the primordial, such as pushback, may be used and is not required. It should be noted that constant abilities that have a specific timing condition, such as crit evade, always take effect in that window and therefore can be used multiple times in the same round. The one exception to this is that some powerful constant abilities could be used in a dual timing situation, such as they can be triggered either during the first or second ability window of a Titan attack. You must choose which of those timings you will use. You cannot use both of them. So as we begin wrapping up the video, let's just go over a few other key little items that we may want to touch on. In Aeon Trespass Odyssey, exhausting a card means turning it 90 degrees, like this. If you are told to discard a card, you will flip it over so that it cannot be used. And if you're told to remove a card, that's when it will go back to the box. When a card is exhausted, it is still treated as equipped to your Titan, but you cannot use it as an active weapon. You cannot use its defensive statistics, nor can you activate any of its abilities except effects triggered by exhaustion. Also, if the card itself had an ability that allowed you to unexhaust it, you could trigger that ability. It should be noted that passive abilities, such as range 2 to 4 or +1 precision, remain ongoing even if the card is exhausted. To unexhaust cards, each Argonaut may spend their movement or combat action to unexhaust all of their exhausted equipped game elements. Some other game effects may also allow you to unexhaust some or all of your gear. Some other game effects may allow you to unexhaust some or all of your game elements. Also, one clarification on the discarding. If you're told to discard a token, you do in fact discard it as it is traditionally known, meaning you would put it back into the supply. It's just with your gear that when you need to discard it, you flip it over and keep it. And that's everything you need to know to play the Titan round of Aeon Trespass Odyssey's combat. Be sure to check out our previous videos if you haven't already. Be sure to check out all the great content we've got coming in the very near future. We may end up bringing out part 6, which will cover the gear, terrain, and abilities keywords, which is found on pages 63 to 68 in the back of the rulebook here. However, we are certainly going to be moving on to some other content. The next big game we've got coming is Dungeon Universalis. That game has been waiting so long for me to make videos for it, and I'm ready to finally get into that. So that will be the next big one to be looking for us to release, and then we'll probably have some other smaller games in the meantime as well, such as Tiny Epic Dinosaurs, Disney Sorcerer's Arena, Riverwild, and Ancient Realm, among others. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.